You'll never guess what book I'm reviewing today. Hello everyone, welcome to episode 2 of Isaac's Reading Nook. Now, I'm sorry for that introduction. Well, I'm not really. I do not regret it one bit. But whatever you thought of that introduction, there was a reason for it. Because today we're discussing Rick Astley's autobiography, Never. Now, my sister got me this for Christmas, and I'm assuming she did it at least partly to troll me, but joke's on you, Ruth, this is a really good book. Now, usually I'm not massively one for autobiographies. I don't have anything specifically against them, but they're not the type of book that I generally lean towards if left to my own devices. However, having been so graciously gifted this for Christmas, I decided it was absolutely worth a look. And I was right. This was a very interesting read. I was pleasantly surprised. I also wasn't expecting his life story, in a sense, to have started where it did and to have gone in all the directions that it did. In fact, the introduction, before we even get to the first chapter, starts with his brother threatening his dad with an 8-inch kitchen knife, which is certainly not where I expected Rick Astley's story to begin. It's certainly a good way to pique the interest of any reader who was expecting this to start with, you know, a cliche description of the 80s pop scene or whatever. Another thing I was a bit surprised by is that Rick Astley was originally in a band. And not just in a band, he played multiple instruments. He played the drums, I believe also the guitar, before eventually being made the lead singer of the band he was in. I assumed that perhaps Rick Astley just happened to have a good voice and had been discovered by them and was, you know, instantly made into a singer, but specifically a solo singer for that reason. But no, he was in a band. He was a very instrumental guy, so to speak. It was also fascinating hearing the perspective of someone who has worked up close with that trio of producers, because without going into too much detail, it just the way he describes them and the way that they produced the music they did, it's not quite what I had in mind from the little that I knew about them before reading this. I will also add, for any of you who might be a bit suspicious that this book is basically just, you know, 50 pages of him talking about Rickrolling and sort of milking this meme that has brought him a second round of success and a second career, if you will. It absolutely is not that. He doesn't even mention Rickrolling until quite a way through the book. I think it's about the last third or maybe even the last quarter when he starts talking about that. So he really isn't making out as if, you know, his whole life has been Rickrolling and just pandering to the meme, in a sense. Although personally I probably would have enjoyed that, but I know that's not why most people would read an autobiography. So I respect him for not going down that path. There's a lot of focus on his beginnings, you know, his childhood, explaining how that led to the beginning of his career, his thoughts on the beginning of his career, and then quite a lot of detail about those first couple of hits, first couple of albums, how that came to be. And there's a lot there that I didn't know, even though I have listened to some of his early stuff besides just Never Gonna Give You Up. I didn't really know the story behind it, the context, the albums, how successful it was at the time. I genuinely didn't know he'd had multiple number ones. I mean, I knew he must have been relatively successful, but I didn't actually realise that his early hits were as big hits as they were. I also didn't know that his album 50, which came out within the last decade, I'm pretty sure, was a number one, despite him just producing it in a studio next to his kitchen. And also he played all of the instruments on that. Sorry, I realise compared to the last review, this is a lot more just me reciting all the details I can recall from this book. I'm sorry if that's not why you tuned into this video, but there was genuinely so much I found interesting and that I didn't know, despite being probably a bigger Rick Astley fan than anyone else I know. Not that that's saying much, but, you know, to get to an actual review, so to speak, in terms of my own opinion, I genuinely liked this book. I really liked his writing style. I genuinely don't know whether he had a sort of assistant writer or ghost writer for this process, but it seems very authentic, very much the things that he feels are relevant to his overall story and to understanding him. And as I said, the writing voice just comes across as very authentic and earnest and wanting to convey all this, even though as he says in the preface, it wasn't always easy, and I can definitely believe that, because this book goes to some darker places than you might expect for someone that a lot of us just know as a meme. I will also say I've always had the impression, long before reading this book, that Rick Astley is quite down to earth about the fact that he is a meme, or at least is seen as one by so many people. I feel like a lot of celebrities would either have a reaction of complete annoyance and frustration and anger, if anything, at the fact that people are just laughing at this thing they've done rather than appreciating their life's work, or would try and milk it to pander to this meme, as I alluded to earlier. But Rick Astley has never done either of those, as far as I can tell. What he wanted to do was just let the meme run its course, and then he was pleasantly surprised when it didn't run its course and die out, as most memes do, but instead became an evergreen and everlasting part of internet culture, as you can see by this video existing. So, in short, I had a lot of respect for Rick Astley before reading this book, and I have even more now. He's a pretty good writer, his stories are very interesting, his life has gone in so many directions that I never knew about. And yeah, if you like autobiographies, if you like Rick Astley, or if you're just curious to see whether you agree with my opinion on this book, then absolutely, I can recommend this. Feel free to check it out. 4.25 stars from me. That's an oddly specific number, but I stand by it. Thanks for watching this episode. I'll see you next time, and I highly doubt that any of you, except the two of you who saw me reading this book yesterday, long story, I highly doubt that any of you will guess what episode 3 is going to be about based on the first 2 books.